Helm is a much better option. A match, a competition, a fight. Kustomize is a much better option. The competition, the fight. So who is the winner? Today we are going to have a fight. It is going to be a competition. It is going to be a huge match, fight to death between Helm on one hand and Kustomize on the other. Who do you think will win? The fight, the competition will follow certain guidelines. There will be 4 rounds in which those two will be competing. First, we are going to see how do they behave when we want to define our applications. So, how do they fare when defining applications? Then, in the second round, we're going to see how do they behave when we want to define environment-specific configurations or applications, when we want to specify how should an application behave in a specific environment, let's say production or staging or something like that. Then they will be faced with unplanned changes, with unplanned customizations. What happens when somebody needs something that was not thought of in advance? And finally, we're going to see what happens when we want to use third-party applications with Helm and Kustomize. To make the competition, the fight, fair, there will be a couple of rules. First, we will assume that whomever is using Helm or Kustomize is applying GitOps principles. That means that everything should be defined and stored in a Git repository, no random arguments, no random things happening, everything based on definitions stored in Git. We will compare those on the grounds of defining and applying application or Kubernetes resource manifests. Those might have other features, and if they do, those features are out of the competition. So whichever other features they have, they are out of the scope. We care only about ways to define applications, to define manifests or templated manifests or customizable, whatever manifests, and how to apply them to our Kubernetes clusters. Finally, we will not go into details of what Helm is and how it works in all its glory, nor the same thing for Kustomize. We will not go into details. I will assume that you have certain level of familiarity with those. If you don't, then look for my past material. I use Helm almost everywhere, or I used. We'll see about the future. And for Kustomize, there is a link here, somewhere above my head, that you can follow to see the video about Kustomize and Kustomize only. But in this video, we're not going into details of what each of those tools is, how does it work, and all those things. We are just going to witness a match, a competition, a fight. So before we start the competition, let's talk about preparations we did for the competition to take place. I created a cluster. I'm using Minikube. It could be any Kubernetes cluster. Doesn't really matter. I installed Nginx Ingress because some of the demo manifests, require it. And I cloned the repository vfarsec, which is me, /helm versus Kustomize, GitHub repository. The address to that repo and all the commands are in a gist, and the address to the gist, the URL, is in the description. So go to the description of this video if you want to do the same as what I'm doing, if you want to replicate the steps, if you want to reproduce the competition, the fight. And I have 2 terminals here, right? In this side, in this terminal, you will see Helm commands, and in this terminal, you will see Kustomize commands. You will see equivalent commands for both, more or less as equivalent as they can get, and you will be able to compare both of them by seeing them both in parallel. So let's start the first round, which is about defining applications. How do we define applications in one or the other? So when defining applications with Helm, we use templates. And the templates look something similar to this. Helm templates Ingress YAML, right? Now, they're a mixture of YAML, which is a typical Kubernetes definition, manifest YAML, plus some templates or snippets of templates, like in this case, release name, or more importantly, in the examples that follow, this one, values Ingress host. So it's a combination, it's a templated YAML. So it's not pure YAML, which might be good or bad thing depending on how you look at things. Now, if you go to Kustomize, the equivalent of this definition in Kustomize would be this one, Kustomize base ingress YAML, right? Now, the difference is that this one is pure YAML. There is no template, there is nothing except simply a typical Kubernetes definition for an ingress controller, Nginx in this case. Now, there is another thing important in both cases. We need to be able to customize. Hey, I'm using the term customize, look at me. To customize how will certain manifest behave, to fine-tune it for specific use cases. And in both cases, we want to be able to change potentially the host, for example, of an application, of ingress host, right? So in case of Helm, we would do that customization through variables. So we have something like this, Helm values.yaml, that define, hey, ingress is enabled and the host is this one, right? So this is how we are going to define the default host using Helm. In case of Kustomize, we don't have any equivalent of variables, of values. The closest we have in Kustomize would be something like that, the base customization YAML. Now, this one doesn't define anything but the resources that will be deployed, deployment, service, and ingress. In case of Helm, everything in the templates directory will be deployed, and in case of Kustomize, only the resources that are specified will be deployed, which can be good and a bad thing depending on how you look at it. Kustomize forces us to be explicit, to set, hey, I want these and these and those, and those are the resources I want. While Helm uses everything that is in a template directory. Now that is convenient because you can just push things over there, but on the other hand, if you want to exclude some files, you need to start writing some nasty if statements, which are, in my opinion, horrifying, but hey, I'm a judge, I'm not a jury in this case. But in this specific case, there is no equivalent of values in case of Kustomize for a simple reason, because we are now presenting the default behavior. How do we define the default behavior in Helm and Kustomize with the potential to change it, but later? So we have no values simply because, or equivalent of values in Kustomize, because by default, it should be pure YAML. We are going to see how we change that later. Now let's see how we can apply those manifests in Helm and in Kustomize. So in Helm, it would be Helm upgrade -- install, which both combined are equivalent to kubectl apply, DevOps toolkit, and we are going to call it the directory actually where the chart is defined is Helm, and the namespace will be Helm dev. And finally, we want Helm to create the namespace. So that's how we do it in Helm. In case of Kustomize, we are going to create the namespace first. I will show you later how we can actually let Kustomize create namespace, but for now, we'll create it. kubectl create namespace Kustomize dev. And we are going to build the manifest. Now, this is a huge difference between, potentially huge difference between Helm and Kustomize. Helm can be used to apply manifests to the Kubernetes cluster. With Kustomize, no. There is no Kustomize equivalent of kubectl apply. And that can be a bad thing, but can be a good thing because with Kustomize assumes that we are using kubectl. It doesn't try to replace kubectl in any form of way. Its job is only one. It has only one job, and that is to generate manifests that can be piped into kubectl to apply them to the cluster. So we would do something like Kustomize build, and then the path Kustomize, which is base, and we want to pipe that to kubectl, and we want to specify the namespace, which is Kustomize dev, and we want to apply
whatever is defined in the input. File name dash means standard input. This is how we apply manifests with Helm on one hand and Kustomize on the other. And you already saw how to define manifests, what are the differences between templating and pure Kubernetes YAML, and how we really haven't seen how we can customize yet. But we are now talking about defining the application with its default behavior. So in this round, who is the winner? I would say that Kustomize has a slight edge when we're talking about default behavior of applications, because Helm requires upfront planning. You need to figure out in advance which parts of manifests will be templated, and we don't need to do that with Kustomize because it uses overlays, which we're going to explore in the next round. So I would say that for defining applications, Kustomize is a winner simply because it's easier. It is pure Kubernetes. Now you can use pure Kubernetes YAML files in Helm as well, but if you do that, it would be a tie, but then Helm would be a huge loser later when we get into customization. So you definitely need to plan in advance with Helm. Now let's go into the second round. Clear. Second round is about defining environment-specific applications or manifests or customizations of our applications. Let's say that we want to deploy to production. All right, how would we define what production is and how does it differ from the default manifests using Helm and Kustomize? So in case of Helm, we would have a separate file with values. So the values that we used before are the default values, and we would have values that overwrite those defaults usually in a separate file. So we would have something like values.production YAML, and this would be the values that we want to overwrite for production. Ignore the parts that are commented. You will see later. Think of them as non-existent. They will become important later in the fight. But for now, this is how we tell with Helm, hey, in production, I want my host to be different. Instead of helm.devopstoolkitseries.com, it should be helm-production and then whatever is the address, right? So we overwrite the default values, or we customize the default specification using variables or values. And that is pretty straightforward. Anybody can do it, no matter their knowledge about Helm and even Kubernetes itself. You don't need to know anything about almost anything to change few values. Now, in case of Kustomize, it's a bit slightly different, a lot different actually. So let's take a look at Kustomize overlays production. This is the overlays that defines production, and the customization YAML file defines what will be different in production. And we can see here that we are specifying the base, so it will use whatever is defined in the base directory as the default setup, default manifests. And then we have a couple of additional entries here. Again, just as with Helm, ignore the commented parts. They will become important later. For now, imagine that they don't exist. So we are specifying the namespace where application should be running when being used in production. We cannot do that easily with Helm. That's a bit of a bugger. And we are specifying a patch. We are saying, hey, for us to change what will be the host, ingress host in production, we're going to patch something based on the specification in this file. And that something is the ingress called DevOps Toolkit. So as you can see, this is a bit more complex. We are staying with pure YAML or JSON and applying patches instead of specifying different values through values.yaml or equivalent in Helm. Now let's take a quick look at that patch. So cut, customize, overlays, production, and then ingress patch. This is a standard, let's say, Kubernetes patching mechanism. So we are still sticking with Kubernetes. We are saying, hey, we want to replace something specified as spec, and then rules, and the first rule or zero indexed rule, and the host. And the new value of that path should be this customize dash production dot blah, 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 blah. So in case of customize, we are using patching. We are patching things in the same way we would be patching it with Kubernetes, more or less, but define this code, define this YAML, storeable in Git. Now, if you want to apply those things, if you want to deploy our application to production, in case of Helm, that would be, let me clear both screens. In case of Helm, that would be Helm upgrade, just as before, dash install, and the application is DevOps Toolkit, and the path to the chart is Helm, and then we want to specify the namespace, which is Helm production, and we want to create that namespace just in case it doesn't already exist. And here comes the new thing, the important part, which is we want to specify additional values which are stored in Helm, and then values dash production. So we are basically running the same chart, but overwriting values with some other values, which in this case are stored in values dash production YAML file. And in case of customize, customize build, and then the path is customize overlays production. And then we want to pipe that to kubectl apply dash file name dash. So in case of customize, we are specifying a different directory, which is an overlay directory that will use all the base manifests plus the patches. The end result is the same, but the way how we customized our application to be specific for production or slightly different in production varies greatly. And I might say that Helm is a winner here, a clear winner. It is much easier to change, especially for the end user, right? Maybe not for the operator, but for the end user, it is much easier to change a value of a variable than to create a patch, with, hey, replace this with this and that and what's not. It is definitely harder with customize for the end users, and it is much easier to change values in Helm. So a big winner of this round is Helm. It is much more user-friendly, especially for those who are not, how to call people who are not Kubernetes ninjas, right? Who do not understand everything about Kubernetes that they should understand. They just want to deploy their applications somewhere. Winner is Helm. Now let's clear this up. And start a new round. And the new round is what happens if we have unplanned customizations? What would happen if we need to add something that nobody thought we might need to our application, and that's something to be added only to a specific environment? And as example, we are going to use resources. Let's say that for whatever strange reason, which couldn't be justified in real life, we do not want to specify resource requests and resource limits in all the environments. We want to have it only in production. And nobody until now thought about including it in either Kustomize or Helm charts. How would we deal with that as an unplanned change specific to an environment? So in case of Helm, we would open Helm values .yaml, and then we would start adding additional values. So we would add something like resources. I'm uncommenting here instead of writing. So resources enabled false, and we would add the data to be empty. Now this is very important. In case of Helm, when we do post changes, we need to make sure that those changes do not affect anyone who is already using a chart and doesn't want to apply those changes, at least when that's what we want. So with enabled false, we are saying, hey, later on when we change the template, whomever is currently using our chart and doesn't want to have additional information about the resources should keep it to enabled false, and that should be the default value. So we are trying to avoid messing with existing users because they might not want to define resources. And the next thing, apart from changing values, we need to change the template itself. Now I'm going to open this snippets deployment resources only so that I can copy and paste, because I'm too old to memorize things. So if we would need to change the templates, and to change the templates, we would need to modify one of the templates, and that's Helm templates deployment, for example, might be where we want to add resources. And then we would need to modify the existing template, in this case deployment, by adding something like this. And this is a bit ugly. What this really means is that, hey, if the resources enabled is false, then do nothing. And if it is set to true, then do something. And that way we are maintaining backwards compatibility. You will see a lot of if statement in Helm charts, in Helm templates, as a way, among other things, not the only thing, but among other things, to maintain backwards compatibility. So it translates to apply those changes only to those who opt in for those changes. And the changes are to add the resources section and the values of the resources section, the memory and CPU requests and limits, are whatever is in the resources data variable, and then indent it by 12, meaning move it 12 characters to the right. It is far from pretty or trivial, but again, depends whether you like templates or not. Now, let's see how we would accomplish the same thing with Kustomize. Actually, let me keep this on screen so that you can see the Helm part. So with Kustomize, we would create a patch instead of changing existing templates or what's or not. We would create a patch that is specific to production. And this is a huge difference. Everything we do with Helm applies to everybody unless we say otherwise. And in case of Kustomize, we create patches that are specific for some overlays or some environments or namespaces, clusters, whatever we choose to differentiate it. So cut Kustomize overlays production deployment patch. Now imagine that we just wrote this file, and this file is basically saying, hey, when you take the base deployment, the standard deployment definition called DevOps Toolkit, I want you to go to spec template spec and then containers to get that part of the existing definition, find the container called DevOps Toolkit, and then add or modify the resources. So you can think of this part as all this as being a path to something that should be changed, and the latter part, starting from resources, is what we want to patch it with. And then we would need to make a change to Kustomize overlays. Actually, let me clear it. So vim Kustomize overlays production customization. And I will uncomment here. You would normally write it. We would say patch strategic merge, and this is the file we want to use to patch something, right? So it stays pure YAML. We are just defining a patch that will be applied only for this overlay or only for this environment, in this case for production. Now, let's clear this up. There is one more thing I forgot almost. Hey, that was bad from me. So Helm, we will need to modify the values that we use to override default values of Helm, those that are specific to production. So it's Helm values production. And then we would be writing, and in this case, I'm commenting this section. Hey, by default, resources is set to be enabled false. And now we're going to change it to be enabled true. So we're going to enable the resources section of the template only for this environment, and we're going to specify data, limits, CPU and memory, requests, CPU and memory, right? And one more. So we're specifying values that are specific to this environment, production. And there we are. So applying is the same as before. Now, in this case, I will proclaim Kustomize a winner. When things are unplanned, then Helm is a bit more complex, at least from the perspective of the person doing it, because it requires changes that could potentially affect everybody. So we need to ensure that the default values are set in a way that they do not apply to anybody except to those who want to opt in for that new addition, for that new change. It's nasty if statements and the multiple value definitions, default ones and overwritten ones, and so on and so forth. Kustomize is much more friendly when we want to make unplanned changes, because patches are, at least in my opinion as a judge of this competition, more easier. Not more, it's easier. Now let's go to the next section, and for next section we are not going to use screens, so I'm going to go full screen again.
So how do we deal with third-party applications, with applications that we do not control, or at least do not control fully, or maybe we could control them but we don't want to because they are third-party apps? If you use a third-party app that has a Helm chart that does everything, and I repeat, everything that you need, Helm is a clear winner. There is absolutely no doubt that you should use Helm with third-party applications if the chart that they provide does everything you need. However, if you have extra requirements, then Helm is going to be very problematic when it comes from third parties. And the reason is very simple. Nobody, and I repeat, nobody can define a Helm chart that contains all the permutations that everybody or somebody or anybody might need. And the reason is very simple. Kubernetes is huge, is vast, and we are nowhere close to have some kind of standard and the things that are adopted by everybody. Let's take networking as an example. Most Helm charts assume that you're either not exposing that application to the outside world through some form of ingress, or that you're using Nginx ingress. But that is not always the case. And actually, with increased adoption of service meshes, that is less and less the case. It might not be ingress, it might be Istio gateway, or it might be ingress but not Nginx but something else. There are many permutations of how you might expose your applications to the outside world. And then there are many other things. How do we do internal networking? Are we using, again, service mesh or Kubernetes services? How do we deal with persistent volumes and storage and so on and so forth? How do we deal with secrets? Almost all Helm charts assume that you're using Kubernetes secrets, but that is less and less the case. And if it is less and less the case, then hey, which secret management are you using? It could be something like sealed secrets, or it could be Vault, or it could be many, many different things. It is impossible to predict all the permutations that everybody using a third-party app, or sometimes commercial, sometimes open source, anyways, third-party app, because there are too many of those permutations. So if Helm chart of a third-party app does everything you need, use it. But if it doesn't, then Kustomize is a better option. And I would argue that for most of us, actually Helm charts of third-party apps do not do exactly what we need them to do, and there are some modifications that we need to do, and that is possible with Helm, but it is not easy. With Kustomize, I can say, hey, use the official Kubernetes manifests for this app, let's say Argo workflows, and then patch them with those changes. Replace secrets with this or do that. And I can even select which manifests I want to include, unlike charts that are basically included in always everything, except there is an if statement that can be used to exclude something. So who is the winner of this round? Depends. I hate when others say depends, because I think it translates to you don't have an opinion, but in this case it really depends. If a Helm chart, third-party Helm chart, does everything you need it to do, use Helm. Helm is a better option. But if there is any change you want to apply to manifests of those third-party apps that is not already thought through and included in a Helm chart, Kustomize is so much easier, so much better option. And on top of that, let's not forget about one more important thing. Not all third-party apps have Helm charts, but absolutely every third-party application that is meant to run in Kubernetes has Kubernetes manifests. And Kustomize adopts Kubernetes manifests naturally. For Kustomize, Kubernetes manifests are what actually it needs. So who won? Nobody. That's who won. Neither of the solutions give us what we truly need. And which one you're going to use depends on what is your target audience. For end users, for people who are not, let's say, sysadmins or operators who do not understand Kubernetes in depth, Helm is a much better option, because I can say, hey, I'm a JavaScript front-end developer. I want to deploy this application. I don't know much about Kubernetes. I'm just going to take a look at those values, change a couple of them, a few tweaks to the values, not to the manifests. I cannot change the manifests, but I can change those values. I understand what those values are, and off I go. My application is up and running. I know nothing about Kubernetes. That is user-friendly. That is great. And knowing the details about technology becomes a bonus, not a requirement. And with Helm, understanding of how Kubernetes works, of its manifests, resources, and what's or not is a bonus. It's not a requirement unless you're the person defining Helm charts. Then you definitely need to know ins and outs of absolutely everything. But for the end user, Helm is so much easier. Now, for the person who does define manifests and defines what should be the resources deployed and applied and what's not in Kubernetes, Kustomize is a much better option because it is more flexible, it is closer to Kubernetes, doesn't require us to think in terms of templating, but in terms of defining Kubernetes resources like pure YAML manifests and applying patches, differences, changes to those manifests depending on the environment, or in customized terms, overlays. So who is the winner? Depends who is the audience or who are the judges. If the judges are developers, the winner is Helm. If the judges are operators or sysadmins, people who understand Kubernetes in depth, the winner is Kustomize. So there is no winner, because one is end user friendly and the other one is sysadmin operator friendly. Now there is a gray area in between. It's not like, hey, this is only for end users and this is only for operators. Of course, there is a gray area in between, but if I would need to qualify it, I would say like that. No winner. For developers, Helm. For operators, Kustomize. Thank you for watching, and remember, the most important thing you need to do, apart from choosing Helm or Kustomize or both, is to subscribe to this channel and then to click the like button. And if you want to support this channel, then you might want to get some courses or the books. They are all in the description of this video. It means a lot to us if you subscribe. It means even more if you like the video, because you did like it, right? If you want to buy us a coffee or a pizza or a Red Bull, then get one of the courses or the books. The links are in the description. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Cheers.